Welcome everyone to our podcast. It's me, Zero, here with
Slider.
Decade.
Josh Knight the First.
And today we're talking about episode 12 of Kamen Rider Ex-Aid, the special Christmas episode, The Stolen Snowy Christmas, or as the English in the title reads, Xmas. That episode this week. It starts with Emu confronting Kiria, confirming that Dan was Gidam. Because we finally did find, well, the rest of the characters did find out in the end of the last episode that Dan was, well, Kuroto Dan, that has importance now, was Gidam. And Kiria asked Emu if Emu finally has some trust in him. So, that's a very nice scene to start off this episode. Just trust. That's been a lot of our focus in this series so far, is trust.
Yeah, it was nice to see both characters sincerely happy, I guess.
Yeah.
After so much turmoil from the last few arcs.
Well, I think it's interesting that compared to the other episodes thus far, we start off the episode and there's no opening theme right there. We go right into the beginning of the action. Basically, it's a simple way of showing you, as an audience member, that going into this episode, you're not meant to expect what's normally going to happen. There's something very different about this episode, even if you didn't know already.
It kind of reminded me of a finale episode, because that's usually what's done is you get starting credit, or first episode, you get credits and then you'll get the title card, but you won't get the actual theme song.
That is interesting. I mean, it did seem odd because we've been consistently just getting the intros. But that is a weird aspect also because I've been watching a little bit of earlier Heisei stuff where you tend to have plot and then intro. And this show just continues to have more throwbacks to early Heisei where, especially even in this episode, a couple scenes where, I'm like, okay, we haven't seen a scene like this in a while. But yeah, finishing, tying up the plot points from last episode and then hitting the title usually is like an early Heisei beat, and, it's weird for post-decade show to do it, but it's also like a standard writer thing to do, so again, the show being a weird mix of early Heisei and its own thing. It's kind of interesting again.
So yeah, the next point is they're kind of curious. One of his lines, "The truth can ruin one's life," and because we are talking a lot about this accident that happened 5 years ago, and that it wasn't merely an accident, and that the friend was told he had the virus and was shaken by it and got into a traffic accident. And it's Kiria's kind of leading motivation that sometimes telling the truth isn't quite the right thing to do. So we're dealing with that a lot this episode.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of obvious that that's what happened, that he didn't die of the virus, but it was still a pretty good plot device, just to show that most people would kind of freak out if they knew what exactly was going on in their body. Whereas most of the patients are kind of like, oh, I got the virus, that kind of sucks. But his doctor friend really knew what was, I guess, the extent of how bad the virus was. Which is why he freaked out. Or he was just kind of a weak-minded person, but I don't know. It was interesting.
I mean, you don't generally tend to be a corner if you can't take some hard truths, but yeah, you're right. It could have just been he realized the entire severity of this. Because you gotta remember, at that time, they only had, the proto-gashats around. I don't even think they were level 2, so how good was their success rate, right? Taiga lost one patient at least. Who knows how many more people died.
Well, I thought it was interesting that going into this from the setup that we saw earlier on in the series, how they give enough credit to the case that there's physical evidence that he didn't die specifically from the Bugster virus, so that Hiro distrusts him further. So that's good character development there. But as far as building out the story as to what it actually means, showing that he did die as a result of getting the bad news, really, I think that's a very, very human thing for somebody. Yeah, like some of you guys are saying, if you get bad news, you might not be able to take it. You might crack. You might not want to even go through it. You think of somebody who has a terminal illness, sometimes they'll elect not to go through treatment. They'll just want to make it as painless as possible. I think what happened here is, as they've shown us, he got the news, ran off kind of in a frenzy, and then might have accidentally run into traffic, and that's how he died. But I do think that's a very good job of character building there, that Kiria takes it upon himself, because if he thought for a second, and this would be just my opinion there, if he thought for a second that telling him straight up what he was diagnosed with was going to end his life, he probably never would have done it. But as such, he has to live with that and carry that over into the present day as a writer.
Pretty much.
Well, I think part of it is, since this is Ex-Aid, this is Emu's show, the interesting thing to look at in that is that with the 4 basic writers, not counting Genmu, Emu is the only one who has something traumatic in his past that isn't affected by it. Everybody else, it defines them so hard in a negative way. Hiro wants revenge, Kirio wants revenge, Taiga wants revenge. Emu's the only one trying to do something positive with something that happened in his past.
I actually never thought about it that way. And I'm sure we'll find out, or maybe not. I'm guessing Dan has something in his past. Some sort of motivation. Hopefully he does.
Normally when you have a writer versus writer show, your main writer is basically your thesis statement of your show, right? And this thing of like what makes this guy worthy of being like the head writer, and like what you just pointed out, like I didn't think of that, but it's so interesting that like tragedy does not define. It's very much like the thing with Flash, like such a traumatic past, but such a bright person.
Right, exactly.
And basically Emu's pretty much the same kind of character. Same, well, not the same. I was gonna say the same thing with Riki, but that's not true. It's more like it's the same thing with Blade, where like he had this, like both of Blade's parents are dead, right? But that's not what defines him. He wants to make it better for everybody else.
So to wash away his regrets, Kiria says he needs to figure out why the bugster exists. Just a motivation. And then we're reminded that Emu still needs to solve the problem with the kid from last episode. That I almost forgot about. At which point we get the title card with no Excite. The sponsor page's Christmas level 1 is still there because we haven't mentioned it, but this episode actually aired on Christmas in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is worth noting. Not only is it the Christmas episode, it also aired on the 25th in Japan. So we start off in the CR headquarters, with the head doctor being stupid with the line, "The Black CEO is Ginham's Ex-Aid."
Look, Japan in puns and wordplay. It's a thing with languages like that. Like, it doesn't really work that well in English.
Poppy's mad that Kuroto Dan used him for tests. The adorable whiteboard drawing was back.
Yes, it was. We got to fully see it.
There was a better shot later in the episode, too. Then there was the one word that annoyed me in the front part of this episode. And it's one of my biggest annoyances about Poppy and the
What's that?
And the lead doctor guy. The people panic. Just a bunch of peas, and it's annoying me. It annoys me.
Seriously? Oh, that was freaking adorable.
I would beg to differ.
Oh.
Yes!
I'm getting outvoted on my own podcast?
Yes!
No. I'll side with you. I don't exactly like it. I don't like it, but I don't really dislike it. It's just a thing. So
I'll say as much as this part of the episode that we're up to, that much is pretty much par for the course as far as her Yes, as far as her character's concerned, the most annoying part we haven't gotten to yet.
Well, one thing I do like, though, is how Hinata Kyotaro sensei is kind of just watching over their silliness from that screen.
Where he's saying, yeah, he's up there talking about the disappearance of Kuroto Dan and how none of the other Gundam employees were involved in that, so we have no reason to cast more actors for them.
I mean, there's a couple things, especially with that monitor. One, the CR logo has a snowflake on it now, but okay, that was cute. The other thing is, it's so, like, if we put this on a board and gave it a beeping light, this would be so, like, a show reference, like, okay, good. Now we replace the big bad guy with another big bad guy, and he's just gonna be in the same position and act like nothing's different. Right? But they basically would just have the thing of, you took away one authority figure for another. And, like, now you're trustworthy suddenly. Like, I'm kind of on the fence of, like, okay, you're probably a good guy, but, you know, I can't give you 100% on this right now. Plus, one more thing. It's weird that Poppy's like, oh, he was just using us. I'm like, wouldn't you have a bigger reaction? Like, didn't he create you?
So, yeah. Right. Well, either that, or less of a reaction, because it isn't her that he was doing the test on, it was the 4 writers.
I don't know. I think I'm kind of more annoyed because they sidestep, like, the great, you know, Poppy has the show writer arc of, now I was created by evil, now I'm gonna fight evil. And then pretty much just, like, sidestepped it. It's like, yeah, whatever.
Well, we'll get to that later. So, yeah, none of the other Gundam employees were involved from that broadcast involving Kyotaro. There was the Emu confronts the mother and asks why he hated cakes, and we find out that, I don't think they ever mentioned it last episode, but she and her husband, the kid's dad, work at a cake shop, and they're always busy this time of year. And he was probably upset about that.
Yeah, that was never mentioned last episode.
Which, I think we kind of guessed that he was upset because they were working.
I mean, it makes sense, you know, for an episode like this, you want to bring in the Christmas feels for people watching. So, at heart, the kid does care about his parents. He wants to spend time with them. He's just found that blaming Christmas is just easier for him. But at the same time, you see he made that wreath for them. So he does care. He does want to celebrate. He just wishes they were around more.
So then we find out that Dan Masamune, the former Gundam CEO, who we do later find out in this episode is Dan Kuroto's father, is currently serving some prison sentence. We don't know why. Kiria asks why. We aren't privy to the information yet, but he is in jail.
Well, if you want to talk about everybody being defined by the tragedy in their past, here's a big old red circle around Kuroto Dan's past right here, and it says Dad on it.
I just mentioned that earlier in this episode of the podcast, and I didn't even think about that. Yeah, right
I was
there.
gonna make a bad Christmas joke here, but...
Do it.
Basically, I was gonna say it's almost as if it was gift wrap for him, you know, this plot point.
Uh-huh.
Oh, God.
There we go. See, I said it's bad.
We're introduced to Kuroto Dad.
Oh.
Kuroto Dad.
Okay, that's bad. That's bad.
I think that's worse than Zero's.
I was trying.
One more thing. Like, as soon as he walked in, I'm like, how many scenes are you ripping off Ryuki's show? I know, like, the actor said that they grew up watching that show and they like it, but god damn it.
It does seem that they're pulling a lot from that particular season. I'm not sure why it is that they're choosing to do that. But I note what they're doing, like, okay, I see what you're doing there. I see the references. I'm surprised that they're making as many references as they are. That having been said, if this is the case, because I would assume you guys would agree, for a dad, he looks too cool to be just a dad.
Yeah.
He looks too young to be a dad.
That too.
I was thinking maybe he, like, adopted the kid. Yeah, he looks too much like, okay, I'm gonna be a villain in an arc coming up.
Exactly. More likely than not, just based off the way he looks, I'd say he'd be a major player later on in the story. If that's the case, that would lead to this year being 3 years in a row of evil dads in the story.
Well, let's see. I looked up this guy earlier. Let's see. He's from a group, some group called Access.
Mm-hmm.
AXS. It's a Japanese pop group. He is 47. He doesn't look 47. He does not look it.
Well, the Japanese age much more gracefully than we do, unfortunately.
So in this next scene, there is a foreshadow to the new form that's coming out next week. In the flashback where, so when Emu was alone as a kid, he passed the time by playing games and drawing.
As most kids do.
As most kids do. And Shuhei passes the time by climbing trees, and Amy saw it. But yeah, in that drawing segment, on his piece of paper, there was the almost foreshadowing for the new form that debuts in the show next week and within the movie.
Yeah, I just rewatched that scene. I'm like, okay, is there a mirror somewhere here?
Yep.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, because I'm like, oh, this is too perfect. But no.
He's gonna flip the page and there's gonna be bugsters on the next next paper.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, there isn't, but then I'm like, oh, this lighting, it's too much Evangelion. We're just gonna cut to like a playground and him just making a sand pyramid.
Possibly.
I thought it was interesting, like where they shot the kid. Like, it looks like some empty garage. It's pretty depressing. I wonder if that was just for effect or...
I mean, it might have something to do with it because you don't know anything about Emu's parents,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So yeah, the bugster thing goes on the move while they're in the middle of talking, and it's salty still, and it attacks the mom who was working. Standard attack your stress points.
Mm-hmm.
Emu transforms into Ex-Aid and then uses the Shakuriki sports gashat that Genom used to use in Sports Action Gamer level 3. So it was pretty much the same suit with a different undersuit.
Admittedly, though, the colors match a lot better with Ex-Aid than they do with Genom.
They do.
Like, the suit looks better on Ex-Aid, it's just the hair, I think, looks better if it's darker underneath that.
Yeah.
I was kind of disappointed that they didn't play the whole Shakariki jingle because, yeah, I mean, I guess we've seen the gashat so much, but I do like the full-length jingle.
Well, we already cut time for the episode by skipping the intro. Speaking of the intro, Excite plays during this scene, so it's not completely absent.
No, it's not. And they want to keep promoting it as much as they can since they want people to buy the single when it comes out.
The other interesting thing was, like, yeah, they were doing a slightly different henshin for that bike, but interesting shot because I guess I'm the interesting shots guy, and I missed a couple, the last couple episodes, but it cuts to like a low angle and then he henshins, and the henshin is the CGI bike and it's running across the camera even though it's like a low angle. I'm like, that's interesting. Normally you don't, like, one, get low angle henshins, and two, you don't get the damn CGI effect cutting in front.
Mm-hmm. If there's one thing I've noticed specifically with this season, as opposed to, say, the last, say, 4 seasons or so, they're really stepping up the cinematography with each episode, which is surprising, because you figure, you know, Sunday morning Japanese kids show, they're not going to put that much thought into it, but especially in this episode, you see they're going for those different angles to make it more dramatic and more popping to the eye. So I think, at least for this episode, they were specifically aiming for that.
Yeah, this was pretty nice.
So yeah, then Brave Level 3 appears, he's already transformed. And then we get to our Christmas gimmicks stuff, which is the Christmas energy item, which turns Ex-Aid into a level 1 with a Santa hat and a Santa sack, and the bike is decked out in tinsel. And we find out, Rich, any thoughts on that?
Any thoughts on this? Yeah, because it's like, this show is weird. It forgets the doctor thing and the gamer thing until it like suddenly brings it up, and you're like, wow, that matches perfectly. It's just a seasonal item. And it's a perfect seasonal item because it's so like overtly like okay, this is the Christmas outfit, like, put it on. Like, everybody gets it because, like, every class gets a Christmas outfit.
Yeah.
I mean, the interesting thing was, like, even Poppy got to be in it.
Yeah.
Because then she did, like, her knife scalpel thing, where they, like,
Oh, yeah.
grew huge, and then they looked like wings for a second, and then she, like, cuts the environment. I'm like, that was pretty cool, that she even got to sort of power up. The only
Yeah.
bad thing about that was, like, I wish she, like, okay, you know she's not gonna beat the boss, but, like, she could have beat the grunts. Like, a couple of them.
Well, technically, she kinda did.
We'll get to that after we get past the plot points. So yeah, we find out that the kid climbed the tree because he was making a wreath for the family. So yeah, and we finally confirm from the kid that he hates Christmas because the mom's never home. Mom and dad are never home at Christmas because they're working, which we already knew. Just a personal thing. I love that the Christmas cake isn't the Caradeco cake that they promote every year. I just like that for some reason. It isn't. Neither of the cakes in the episode are the Caradeco cakes.
I think that would have been a little too on the nose for what they were trying to do this episode. So, I don't blame them for not going with it.
I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah. I mean, that cake is great because it's like, it's this cute little cake, and then it's got, like, figures on top, and the figure of the kid is in shock that he received the cake on top of the cake.
Yeah.
I feel obliged to mention Ex-Aid Level 1 beating Salty over the head with Santa's bag. Because that was great.
I mean, like, the only more effective Santa item would be probably, like, Wizard's Ring. Because that just proves that Santa's a mage.
And then we had Christmas Level 3 Brave. Which brings us to... I'm just gonna call it Poppy Bells.
You know what? Screw Poppy Bells.
Yes!
What?
Completely and totally. No, it did not need to exist.
Screw that,
I
it
need
was
some brand
awesome.
bleach. That one.
I just want to understand how she turned a butter knife and a fork into giant weapons.
You do realize we're watching a children's kids show, right? A children's hero show.
I gave it a break because it's been so good.
Like, I'll understand that, but as far as the singing goes, I thought, up until this point, that the most annoying rendition of Jingle Bells ever sung in a Christmas-themed episode of Kamen Rider was Naomi from Den-O, but this took the cake.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
if it had been actually Jingle Bells, even the Japanese version, that would have been fine. But this nonsense, that gibberish.
I don't know, man. I kind of like it.
Now, I get it. I totally get it. I'm not knocking that. You're allowed. That's perfectly reasonable. I'm just saying I almost had an aneurysm.
No, my thing is, it was just the perfect, like, over-the-topness for this episode, because, like, it just cuts to, okay, it's probably the Brave's level 3's ability is just to cut to, like, Poppy's room, because, you know, it's using that gashat. But it's basically a music video that they stuck into a Kamen Rider episode, and I'm like, you know what? This episode is just crazy enough to make this work. And it's so, like, because it's the perfect, like, if you don't know what's gonna happen, it's the perfect, like, alright, this is just a ridiculous, over-the-top episode. It's just like, you know what? Go crazy. Go all the way. I mean, you're never gonna suspect what's coming.
In that sense, yes, it does lull you into a false sense of security for what's going to happen in just a few minutes.
Just like she lulled those bugsters into dancing before they blew up.
I like the Merry Christmas game clear, though, at the very end. Because A, it meant it was done. B, Merry Christmas game clear. What's more to say? And then on Transform, and we see... It's time for predictableness. Poppy singing is causing stress to the patient. Almost like a bugster. And then she says, of course it is.
Well, hold up. You skipped Parado collecting the Bugster virus. I just wanted to point out that it was interesting that the strain was silver, and it had like these dark orange bits in it, so...
Yeah. But there was that. And then we had that Poppy singing causing stress to the patient because she didn't stop singing even though the music was over. And she says, of course not. It's because I'm a bugster born from Dere Mi Fa Beat.
Was anybody surprised?
Well, to be fair, they pretty much broadcasted that from the end of episode 1.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as she said, I'm from Dere Mi Fa Beat.
I love how, like, the other two call her out on it, too. It's like, of course, it's so obvious. And then they, like, totally, like, burn her. And it's like, of course I know. I'm a genius gamer, basically, right? And then, like, Hiro, what does Hiro say?
He says, of course it is. Karino Asana is a pun off of whatever the Japanese is for pretending to be a nurse.
Yeah. I love that, like, fade to gray, where she's, like, so stunned that they figured it out.
Well, it's not even just that they figured it out, it's the fact that they figured it out and then they didn't care.
That is true.
That was half of the amazingness. They didn't care. So then we get the serious stuff starting to happen for the episode. Because not only is this the Wacky Christmas episode, it is also a heavily plot-driven episode.
Yes.
It seems the two-parters are all very heavily plot-driven.
So we see Dan's that the Parado collection things is going towards the ultimate game called Kamen Rider Chronicle, which is definitely the final form.
I'm not so sure that it'll be the final form, but it probably has something to do with Endgame as far as the whole arc of the series is concerned.
If we're talking about games and stuff like that Kamen Rider Chronicle sounds like a final form if there ever was one to me.
I mean, there is, but Toei has this bad ability of like, oh, this looks like a great final form. Oh, what? We can sell more toys. I mean, this is more of a Bandai thing. Let's just tack on another one.
Yeah, I don't feel like they'd reveal it at episode 12.
No, they can tease things just fine right here, but if they're following trends from the last at least 4 years, if it looks like it should be the perfect final form, they'll introduce it somewhere around episode 25, and then the much weaker, not so great looking actual final form will show up somewhere in the mid-30s.
So true. We reveal that Poppy is a Bugster, which means that they can be good Bugsters, because Bugster is just the name of anybody who's like that game AI thing that's like in the human world now, right? So I wonder if we're ever going to get to the point where, like later on in the show, if we're going to get like good Bugsters or more of them, because this is more of like a Blade reference. You know, it's like the Tiger Undead. Are we ever going to get like that?
Yep.
Well, even with the last couple of years, you have that in Drive. There were good Roy Mute's right. Ghost. There were good ghosts there. Aside from the ones
good as in affiliation, not good as in writing.
Exactly. Yes, I would agree to that.
I mean, it could be interesting because like their job is healing, and all they've been doing is just taking out the Bugsters. I mean, admittedly, they're just mutating, so, like, either the doctor aspect could come up later, probably not, because it's a writer show, or it could be that, like, they're mutating and they're gonna, evolve into just being beyond the programming of, like, hurt humans. Like Poppy. I mean, it could happen. It would be interesting, but still too early for this.
So, yeah. They're sitting around in the CR, eating another cake that's still not the Karadeko cake, so we're still good. Talking about why the Bugster was strange this time, because it was separated from the patient before the operation actually happened. Which we get into is a mutated virus, which is a thing in real life, which they talk about, the flu and everything. But really, just to me, it seems like they're setting up for reusing suits because they used their whole suit budget on the CGI budget.
Yeah, and they did show Salty trapped in the bug visor, so I don't think we've seen the last of him.
I mean, that Salty bit was great because he's almost like, what the hell is this? You know? Like, we're supposed to be friends, like, how could you trap me? But I love how they're having that, like, this show, again, one of those nice things of, like, people can just sit around a damn table and talk strategy or things that's happening instead of having to do it in the middle of a fight scene like we tend to do most times or during a case.
After that, we get Kiryu calling Emu and Taiga saying he has urgent news for them. And as Taiga's heading out, we meet a new character. I think she's new. Saiba Nico wants to beat Taiga up at first, which is weird. It's all decked up in game logos.
Well, merchandising for Ex-Aid, actually. Because she has, like, Snipe and everybody's things on her.
She's got like a Chambada button too.
So yeah, it's kind of weird. She ends up asking him if he can defeat the genius gamer M. So, there's that. She's going to be a very interesting character, it seems.
I think for only being on screen for maybe about 30 seconds, it's a little too early to call that. I'll have to see how they treat her next week.
Yeah, really. If she's back next week.
If she's back next week, but admittedly, if we're down already by 2 characters, they're gonna need somebody to fill in the gap there.
I gotta say, I really liked the background track they played when they were introducing her. It's like some retro space RPG music. I'm really digging the soundtrack.
Admittedly, just kind of slightly related, but slightly on topic there. I'm absolutely going after the soundtrack for this thing as soon as it comes out because,
yeah.
Man, this is a good OST.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Although I'm slightly disappointed that it has no insert songs, kind of like Ghost.
Well, they've got some coming already from Rider Chips and the Kamen Rider Girls.
Sweet.
Nice. That was the annoying part about Ghost, is the only tracks with lyrics on its soundtrack were the one from that idol group that was Koyomi from that one episode.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Well, you can choose to think of it this way. If they saved the money for insert songs from Ghost, that could have gone to the CG budget this year.
So yeah, and that one from MCAT.
From MCAT, yeah.
That could happen, but the thing is, considering Toei has like an entire CGI department now, I think the only reason we've stopped seeing... I mean, the thing is, level 1's boring to look at anyway by this point, and it uses the most CGI, so they'll probably cut that down.
Of course.
But all the other effects are so, like, After Effects-ish, that they probably have, like, a standard bag. Like, it's costing them nothing at this point to keep those in. That's probably the only reason those are in here. But I also think that, like, as the years go by, because they actually have, like, a full CGI department and stuff, they're probably just getting better and better at adding more CGI. I mean, they did it way too much in Drive, where, like, this suit could barely move, so let's use CGI to fix it. But at least in Ex-Aid, you know, everything they do is so flashy.
Yeah, unfortunately, we probably won't get that soundtrack until September at the earliest.
Most likely.
Of next year. Because that's when the Ghost soundtrack came out. Yeah. So, they all start heading over there. But first we get Kiryu confronting Dan Kuroto, who Dan has already heard that Kiryu met with his father. It's like news travels fast, so wonder how he did get that information. Is the dad in cahoots?
No, I don't think so. I think they're pretty distant. That wouldn't make sense for Dan's, like, storyline. I mean, if they were that close together, it would be a very interesting twist, but I don't think Toei's ever gonna pull it off. But They're probably gonna go with the simple, like, okay, you know what? It's a game show, I'm just gonna make the Tekken reference. They're probably just doing the Tekken thing of, like, head of giant company is kind of a jerk. And then, like, the son takes over, it's kind of a jerk. And then the father comes and takes over, and it's kind of, Tekken.
Kiryu then says that Kuroto gang came in contact with Enmu 16 years ago. We still don't know to what extent, because there was yet another piece of dialogue that was muted for now. I'm sure we'll hear it in the future. So yeah. And it's slightly annoying that all the stuff is there for us to, if they didn't mute it, to hear and know. But at the same time, I'm glad we aren't getting it all now.
All right, they want to have something to build towards in future episodes, and the fact that they're doing it like this is very good world building and story building.
So yeah. Then we get Kuroto saying, "If I give you dangerous zombie, will you keep your mouth shut?" At first, Kiryu says yes. And then kicks the case away and goes, "Nope, lol." And says, "I'll make you repent for what you've done to the writers and my friend who died on 0 day." So he transforms into level 1, shoves zombie into level 3 slot, and cheapo lighting effects, and his rider gauge drain down to 2. So this is the beginning of our battle. And the introduction, because, anybody want to say anything before I go further?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those interesting things that shows up again. Is like, okay, they're doing the standard Kamen Rider thing of like, okay, I got a new power up, I'm gonna use it. But it's one of my complaints. It's like, dude, you don't know what this does. Like, if you're gonna at least use it, do it in a safe zone. But it also harkens back to what happened earlier in this episode. It's like Ex-Aid just got this level 3 thing and he just plugs it in. And, it works fine, so like you don't even suspect it when like this new Gashite comes out. It's like, oh cool, the heroes just pulled a fast one. They just got the new level up. And it matches Kiryu's character because he just outsmarted Dan. And then it backfires because, again, just because you're doing the thing on impulse doesn't mean it's the smartest thing to do. But this also shows the same thing that it's been repeatedly shown that Dan, like Kiryu is smart, but Dan's always one step ahead.
He really is.
Well, I think going into the episode, even if I didn't already know what was going to happen, if you've seen enough tokusatsu, you can see Kujo was tripping every possible red flag for what was going to happen. This is an episode where it starts with people saying they trust him, there's no opening theme, he made an important call but didn't say what the information was, and now the guy who's had it in for him for the last 5 episodes has him by himself in an abandoned warehouse. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, triggered way too many defeat flags.
Yep.
So yeah, he gets, Dan walks over and pulls Dangerous Zombie out of the belt. He then pulls out his bug visor and equips it as a belt, which the official term is the Buggle Driver, Buggle, or as Google Translate would rather have you believe, the Bagel Driver. I just had to bring that up. While this all is going on, Emu, Hero, and Taiga all arrive and transform and start battling the mooks that appear to block their way. We then come back to Dan, who uses the Dangerous Zombie and the Buggle Driver to transform into Kamen Rider Genin Zombie Gamer Level X / Level 10.
Well, level 10.
Naming is weird in this show. So
I'm going by what he said.
That other new form that's debuting next week is at level 20, but it's called Double X, so everything's weird.
Japan. Yo, I'm more impressed they didn't call it Double Cross at the.
I was wondering if that was the pronunciation too, but No, according to everything we're reading, it's double X.
Definitely. But yeah, it's a new suit. I love this suit. It looks so, it looks a lot like Machine Chaser. In a way.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of, if you guys have seen Surprise Drive of, Super Dead Heat Drive.
Yeah.
For me, I was like, okay, super white suit, so it's a little bit like Fang Joker, but it's not. But then I'm like, okay, this reminds me of something else from Double from the back. I'm like, is this the weathered opponent? Did you like rip off the back parts? And it's got like all the smoke on the shoulders. I'm like,
he's got no giant face on the back.
Yeah, that's true. He doesn't.
Because he doesn't have like a chibi form.
He doesn't need it.
He really doesn't.
He's got no health, and the gauge is cracked, which is pretty legit.
That is very visually impressive there.
Another thing that I noticed is that that I didn't catch before is that he's got like a visor. I thought both his eyes were just different colors, but he has like a cracked visor.
Again, the suit. At first, because it's white, you'd think it wouldn't have a lot of detail, but like if you just pause and look,
It's got a lot of detail on there.
It is just amazing.
at this point, like if I was getting a figure, it'd probably be this thing.
No, as soon as
so
they
asymmetric.
release the fig arts for that, the pre-orders for that are going to go through the roof.
And I think his figure comes out next month, the gimmick figure.
Hey, I'll settle for the gimmick figure.
So yeah, just a beautiful suit. So the three, Laser goes level 3 with Gary Chambada, and we start doing, when we cut back to the other three riders still dealing with the mooks, grunt, whatever the heck you want to call them.
The zombie bugsters.
They're just called the Bugster virus, according to the site. My bad. The gimmick figure may be February. We'll have to see. They're just called the Bugster virus. So yeah. So the three the three riders, Brave, Snipe, and Ex-Aid are just fighting them. They really don't matter to be fair. What matters is Curious getting his butt whooped by Gidim. He gets the Gashcon Sparrow taken from him when he tries to do a finisher, which actually does like nothing to get him. Gary's still in it, and the champ just gets tossed to the side, so we have no idea where that is right now. And then Gidim does a finisher, which ends up dropping Laser's rider gauge to 0. So this is our first, I guess technically second dead rider from 0 gauge, but Dan's kind of a zombie. So this is our first real death. He's actually not coming back anytime soon.
Not from that.
Well, the spring movie little teaser box has Brave, Snipe, and Ex-Aid along with the Q Rangers. And we've already had the picture of Curious after getting the flowers.
Yeah, once you've got them flowers, that's it.
He may come back late in show for something, for flashbacks.
Right.
But for the most part, he's gone.
It's one of those things where like you can have a lot of riders in your show, but you're not really a rider versus rider show unless one of your riders drops dead.
What is interesting, just a little magazine scans from next month have shown us a bike Laser, which is interesting because Kirya did hand Emma the driver with backs of bike still in it right before he dissolves, and he had some really good lines. I think the lines I wrote down were, "Emma, the fate of humanity on this planet relies on you. Don't forget that as long as you keep smiling, you will be who you are, and you can change your fate." It was a very profound moment. He was a good character. I don't know if I like that he went out so early.
I think it's important that he went out as early as he did, due to the fact that because it's a death you're not necessarily expecting to happen this early and be permanent, that means there's more weight to it for the long haul. You think back on, say, Gaim, when we all thought Takatora was dead, that meant something for Michi to have to deal with, but then once they brought him back later on, it took the weight away from it.
Yeah.
Whereas here, if he's gone, the other writers have to carry that with them. Emu has to deal with him dying in front of him right there on the ground. Hiro has to wonder what he did to deserve to die. Taiga saw who did it. He's going to want to get a piece of that action. It's very plot-driven. And I'm very thankful that they're choosing to do this. In all things, the way they played this out, because of the fact, again, I mentioned this in my video there, because of the fact that he got killed off for knowing too much. If you guys have seen Full Metal Alchemist, that makes him the Maze Hughes of Ex-Aid.
Yes, that's a great reference.
Like, he's that character that the main character who's still carrying on after him, he's going to carry that with him. Like, once Emu finally gets, motivated enough and to a point where he can actually take on Genmu, he's going to be like, this is for Kujo.
Yeah. You got anything, Decade?
No, just the fact that I thought it was interesting that, kind of backtracking, they didn't have the usual screen split for, Dan's critical end. But other than that, yeah, I just agree with what's been said already about the whole death scene and its significance. So, go ahead.
Yeah. See, I thought it was significant, and everything you guys said is pretty true with, like, yes, they killed off a character most people would like. He had plot points, he knew a lot. This kind of set up, like, a good character, motivation, drive. Even, like, dynamic, it's definitely gonna shake up the dynamic now. But, it's one of those weird things where I'm like, alright, him dying, good move for the show. The way he died, I was like, alright, fair enough. There was no way he could have won that fight, and Dan just outplayed him. Good. His dying words were bullshit. Because I'm like, alright, this is really nice and touching that, you basically said, like, the thing Dan just pretty much told Emu, like, you're just a shining crystal, you're gonna shatter, right? And then Kujo's pretty much like, just be who you are and humanity will be fine. That's a nice parallel. But the other problem is this freaking Laser. Like, there's no reason he wouldn't give up the info just to spite Dan at this point. To make sure, like, his friend didn't die for nothing. Like, he wouldn't just go out. I mean, they're doing the fate can be changed. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. It worked in Ryuki, man. It worked real well in Ryuki. And you're basically making the same type of character, but I'm like, that's not how... I don't think Laser would die giving some nice pep talk. He would give the information out to take down Dan. Or, not even Dan, just say that, like, Dan has a father or something. Like, don't give any real info, but just like a hint, but he doesn't. He just gives this nice pep talk and dies. I'm like...
I'll go ahead and agree with you there that his dying words there were a bit out of character. I get that they were going for the more sappy sort of feeling there at the end, but no, I get it. As far as what he actually said, it's a bit kind of corny for his character. But all the same, that it doesn't necessarily take weight away from the event itself. Just, I do agree with you that he probably could have said something different.
I mean, I'm not saying that this wasn't weighted. Like, it was very necessary. It was very well done. It's just, I wish they wrote him more in character at the end.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
They wrote him to move the plot along. They didn't write him in character. That's sort of my only complaint. But other than that, it was pretty good.
So yeah, it ends off with him dissolving in nothing, and then the sound effect of just game over. Man, that I don't know exactly what I want to say about that, but that's kind of intense in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, from an artistic standpoint, it's great that, they very much turn up the volume on the sound of the gamer driver so that you can hear that game over, and then you just hear nothing. No background music, just the episode is over, and you gotta deal with this.
The episode is over, and Laser does not appear in the next time preview. With the level 1's hopping down, it is Ex-Aid, Brave, Snipe, and Get 'em. There is no laser there anymore.
Nope, he's been replaced.
Well, not replaced. Get 'em was already always there, but... So yeah. Anything else to say on this episode?
I know this marks, it being a fourth of the way through the series, but by far, from what we've seen up until now since October, this is probably the best episode.
This episode is the debut of the four-way dragon, I think.
I mean, I guess as far as plot being moved forward and emotion, it's the best episode for that.
One thing I kind of just thought of as kind of more of a technicality is that Emu actually becomes a Kamen Rider in the sense that he has a bike now. Because he's going to be using that Gashet to just get...
Call the bike out.
Yeah.
The thing about it that's going to be hard-hitting for people when they see it activated is that it's going to look exactly like it laser, but there's not going to be any eyes on it.
Yep.
I mean, it might make the bike look better, but damn, that's gonna hit.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess we'll see everyone next time for episode 13 of Kamen Rider Ex-Aid, entitled The Fated Destiny.
Yep.
Bye.
Thanks for listening.
See ya.